For decades, cartoons carried the label of kid stuff. But every once in a while, animation broke free of Saturday morning slots and proved it could hit harder than most live-action dramas. These weren't colorful distractions for children. They were bold experiments, cultural milestones, and sometimes straight-up emotional gut punches. So the question is, which animated films made audiences realize they weren't just watching kids' entertainment anymore? Stick around, because a few of these might surprise you. 1. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, 1937. The first full-length animated feature in history was supposed to be Disney's Great Gamble, and critics dubbed it Disney's Folly before it even premiered. Who would sit in a theater for 80 minutes of drawings? As it turned out, everyone. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs wasn't a simple fairy tale. Beneath the cheerful songs and comic dwarfs lurked imagery straight out of a horror movie. Take the Queen's transformation sequence. Twisted hands, bubbling potions, her face contorting into a hag's mask. Or the infamous forest scene where branches grab like claws and eyes glow in the dark. Children in 1937 screamed, cried, and clung to their parents. Critics compared it to gothic horror more than light family fare. What really made the film stand out was its emotional weight. The dwarfs mourning over Snow White's body played more like tragic opera than children's fluff. Audiences had never seen animation hit such dramatic highs and lows. The film became a box office phenomenon, silencing doubters and cementing animation as serious cinema. Walt Disney had proved cartoons could tell stories with the same power as live-action epics. Snow White wasn't just entertainment, it was a declaration that animation could be art, fear, and heartbreak rolled into one, and all of that from what was supposed to be a kid's movie. 2. Bambi, 1942. If Snow White showed that animation could scare you, Bambi proved it could devastate you. On the surface, it's a gentle forest tale about a young deer learning the ways of the wild. But halfway through, the film delivers one of the most infamous moments in cinema: the death of Bambi's mother. No villain with a face, no swelling musical cue, just the echo of a gunshot, frantic running, and silence. For generations, this scene has been seared into childhood memory. The loss was so sudden and real that it left kids shaken and adults reeling. But the film didn't stop there. It depicted fire ripping through the forest like an apocalyptic storm, hunters portrayed as an unseen but ever-present terror, and survival as a brutal fact of nature. This wasn't safe, sanitized entertainment. It was life with all its pain and danger. Walt Disney actually consulted with nature experts to ensure accuracy in animal behavior. Animators spent months studying deer, rabbits, and even flames to capture authenticity. That realism made the heartbreak sting even more. When Bambi premiered, critics called it too grim for children, while adults hailed it as a masterpiece. Over the decades, psychologists have cited it as a rare example of cinema introducing children to mortality in an unflinching way. In short, Bambi stripped away illusions. It wasn't about princes or castles. It was about loss, resilience, and the cruelty of nature. And if you ever doubted whether animation could deliver a raw, emotional gut punch, this quiet deer movie would prove you wrong in minutes. 3. Dumbo, 1941. At just 64 minutes long, Dumbo is one of Disney's shortest features, but it's also one of its darkest. On paper, it's about a baby elephant with oversized ears who learns to fly. In practice, it's a story about ridicule, abandonment, and resilience against cruelty. Early on, Dumbo is mocked, rejected, and literally caged. His only comfort is the lullaby, "Baby Mine," sung by his mother while she's locked away in chains. That image of Dumbo rocking in her trunk has broken hearts for generations. Then comes one of the most surreal sequences in film history. Pink elephants on parade. After sipping spiked water, Dumbo sees a nightmarish parade of shifting, shape-morphing creatures. It's bizarre, psychedelic, and terrifying, light years away from the cozy comfort people expect from a kid's cartoon. But the harshest commentary comes from how Dumbo mirrors real-world discrimination. Characters openly call him names, reduce him to a joke, and exploit him for profit. The story asks audiences to confront cruelty in the guise of entertainment itself. Despite being made cheaply during World War II, Dumbo became one of Disney's most profitable films. Its lasting impact isn't just about a flying elephant, it's about how animation can explore alienation, injustice, and survival with a raw honesty that children feel deeply and adults recognize immediately. Dumbo may look like cotton candy on the surface, but bite into it, and you'll find something bitter, strange, and unforgettable. Fourth Fantasia, 1940. When Fantasia premiered, many audiences didn't know what to make of it. It wasn't a typical Disney fairy tale, nor was it a straightforward concert film. It was an experiment, an anthology of animation set entirely to classical music with no traditional dialogue. The result? One of the most ambitious artistic gambles in Hollywood history. From the moment Mickey Mouse conjures chaos in The Sorcerer's Apprentice, you realize this isn't lightweight entertainment. The film swings from whimsical dancing mushrooms to pure nightmare fuel. Night on Bald Mountain, with its towering demon Chernabog, is still considered one of the most terrifying sequences ever drawn. The animation blends beauty and horror in ways no live-action spectacle of the time could match. Disney's team worked with conductor Leopold Stokowski and the Philadelphia Orchestra, recording music with groundbreaking stereo techniques. The visuals matched every note, turning classical symphonies into cinematic drama. Critics at the time were divided. Some hailed it as visionary, others as pretentious. Kids were baffled, adults were stunned. But Fantasia pushed animation into uncharted territory. It wasn't about story or character alone, it was about mood, tone, and emotional immersion. And it dared to demand something new from audiences: patience, attention, and openness to art. Over the decades, Fantasia has been embraced as a milestone, inspiring generations of animators, musicians, and filmmakers. It showed that animation could reach into the abstract, the surreal, and the profound. Simply put, this wasn't Saturday morning fluff. This was high art with a pulse, wrapped in colors and music that still haunt viewers today. 5. Gulliver's Travels, 1939. While Disney was redefining animation with Snow White, their biggest rival, Fleischer Studios, rolled out an epic of their own, Gulliver's Travels. Loosely based on Jonathan Swift's satire, it was only the second full-length animated feature made in America. And unlike most kid-friendly cartoons, this one carried political and cultural weight. The plot follows Gulliver shipwrecked in Lilliput, where tiny kingdoms are at war over something absurd: which national anthem should be played at a royal wedding. Sounds silly, but in the shadow of World War II, audiences caught the deeper allegory about the pettiness of global conflicts spiraling into disaster. The film's visuals were striking. Using rotoscoping, animators traced live-action actors to give Gulliver himself a realistic look, contrasting sharply with the exaggerated designs of the Lilliputians. This contrast highlighted the divide between the giant voice of reason and the small-minded quarrels around him. Though critics were mixed, the film was a commercial success, earning an Oscar nomination and proving Disney wasn't the only studio capable of crafting ambitious features. More importantly, it treated animation not just as comedy, but as political commentary, slyly reminding audiences that wars often erupt over the pettiest causes. Gulliver's Travels stands as a reminder that even before animation had matured into the modern era, it was already being used to explore ideas bigger than children's stories. It wasn't a cartoon distraction, it was satire dressed in Technicolor, and it proved cartoons could carry sharp, grown-up messages in ways kids might miss, but adults couldn't ignore. 6. The Secret of NIMH, 1982. When Don Bluth broke away from Disney, he wanted to prove something, that animation could be darker, more daring, and more emotional than the Studio Mouse House was willing to allow. His first major project, The Secret of NIMH, wasn't afraid to go there. On the surface, it's about field mice and rats. But this isn't Cinderella's friendly mouse chorus. The story follows Mrs. Brisby, a widowed mouse fighting to save her sick child while navigating a world of lab experiments, mystical powers, and deadly danger. The rats of NIMH aren't just villains or comic relief. They're intelligent survivors of brutal scientific testing, scarred by experiments and forced to build a secret society. Visually, the film was a revelation. Bluth's team used moody, hand-painted backgrounds and heavy shadows, creating an atmosphere closer to gothic fantasy than family cartoon. And the stakes were serious. There's betrayal, death, and an unrelenting tension that builds toward a final showdown where survival feels anything but guaranteed. Critics praised it as a bold return to the ambitious spirit of early Disney. Parents, on the other hand, were divided. Some loved its bravery. Others complained it was too frightening for children. Bluth didn't care. He wanted to prove that animation could carry real drama. And he succeeded. The Secret of NIMH is often credited with reigniting interest in serious American animation during the 1980s. It showed studios and audiences that animation could tackle themes of mortality, sacrifice, and resilience without dumbing down the material. In short, it was a reminder that just because characters are drawn, their struggles don't have to be. 7. Watership Down, 1978. At first glance, it looks harmless, a film about rabbits searching for a new home, but anyone who's seen Watership Down knows the truth. This is one of the most harrowing animated films ever to hit American theaters. Adapted from Richard Adams' novel, the story follows a group of rabbits escaping their doomed warren. Sounds simple enough, but the journey quickly spirals into a brutal survival tale. Predators, starvation, and internal power struggles push the rabbits to their limits. And then there's General Woundwort, a dictator-like rabbit who rules with violence and fear. The fights are vicious, the blood is real, and the message is clear. Nature is merciless, and power corrupts absolutely. When the film reached American audiences, many parents were caught off guard. They expected fluffy bunny antics. Instead, their children saw rabbits torn apart, suffocated, and left for dead. Reviews at the time described packed theaters where kids cried openly while adults sat stunned. But beneath the trauma lies the brilliance. Watership Down is an allegory about displacement, authoritarianism, and resilience. The rabbits even invent their own language, making their world feel fully realized. Critics praised it as daring and profound, though many warned it was far from family-friendly. In the U.S., its PG rating fooled parents into thinking it was safe. Decades later, it's still infamous as the film that scarred countless childhoods. Yet ask those same viewers as adults, and many will admit it was also the film that taught them animation could be as raw, unflinching, and meaningful as any war drama. If you ever thought cartoons were safe, Watership Down begs to differ, and it does so with teeth bared. 8. Heavy Traffic, 1973. Ralph Bakshi never played by the rules. After Fritz the Cat shook up animation, he doubled down with Heavy Traffic, a gritty portrait of life in New York City that made sure nobody mistook animation for child's play again. The film follows an underground cartoonist navigating a chaotic world of gangsters, hustlers, and broken dreams. But don't expect clean lines and cheerful colors. Bakshi filled the screen with grimy streets, mismatched collage backgrounds, and animation that bled into surrealism. It wasn't just a cartoon. It was a fever dream of urban life. What set Heavy Traffic apart was its willingness to be brutally honest. It depicted violence, corruption, and the rough edges of everyday survival in ways live action often softened. The animation style allowed Bakshi to push boundaries, blending dark humor with stark social commentary. Critics were split. Some hailed it as visionary. Others dismissed it as vulgar or incoherent. But no one denied its impact. Bakshi had carved a space for animation that wasn't about animals, princesses, or children's fables. It was about the chaos of adulthood, and it wasn't interested in holding your hand. By proving animation could thrive in the underground, heavy traffic set the stage for later adult-oriented experiments. It wasn't pretty, but it was unforgettable. 9. Coonskin, 1975. Few animated films caused as much uproar as Ralph Bakshi's Coonskin. Intended as a sharp satire of racial stereotypes in America, it collided head-on with controversy the moment it hit theaters. The film blends live-action and animation, following three characters, Brother Rabbit, Brother Bear, and Brother Fox, who navigate a surreal, violent version of Harlem. Using parable-like storytelling, Bakshi skewered racism, corruption, and hypocrisy in American society. But the style was so provocative that many people never looked past the surface. Protests erupted before screenings, with activist groups condemning the film for its imagery. Some theaters refused to show it. Others pulled it after just one night. Critics were polarized. Some called it an unflinching critique of prejudice, while others argued it reinforced the very stereotypes it tried to attack. Lost in the outrage was Bakshi's true intention: to use satire as a weapon, exaggerating tropes to expose their ugliness. His defenders argued that Coonskin was no different than what political cartoonists had been doing for centuries, just turned up to 11. Though its reputation remains divisive, there's no denying the film's influence. It demonstrated that animation could be confrontational, political, and angry, an art form capable of igniting debate far beyond children's entertainment. Love it or hate it, Coonskin was proof that animation could step directly into the cultural battlefield, armed not with swords or magic wands, but with raw, uncomfortable truth. 11. American Pop, 1981. What if you could trace the history of America through its music, not with lectures, but through the bloodline of one family? That's what Ralph Bakshi set out to do with American Pop, and the result was a sprawling animated epic unlike anything before it. The film spans 4 generations of one immigrant family, from the early 1900s to the height of rock and roll. Each character carries the torch of music forward, shaped by the tragedies and upheavals of their time. From vaudeville stages to jazz clubs, from the shadow of World War II to the rise of the counterculture, the story shows how art and pain pass down like inheritance. Bakshi's signature style shines through. He used rotoscoping again, tracing live actors to create realistic movement while layering surreal animation over gritty backdrops. The soundtrack was packed with iconic songs, from Lou Reed to Bob Dylan, making the movie feel less like a cartoon and more like a living jukebox of American history. But what really set American Pop apart was its refusal to sugarcoat. It didn't hide the struggles of artists, the sacrifices, or the cost of chasing dreams. Characters fall, rise, and sometimes burn out completely. Critics applauded its ambition, though some argued it was uneven. Audiences, however, found themselves swept up in its sweeping scope. The movie made one thing clear: animation wasn't just capable of telling whimsical tales. It could capture the grit, the heartbreak, and the raw energy of an entire nation's cultural evolution. American Pop proved that animation could carry weighty, historical storytelling and do it with a style that felt timeless. 12. Fritz the Cat, 1972. Before Ralph Bakshi became the king of experimental animation, he made the film that shook the industry to its core. Fritz the Cat. Based on Robert Crumb's underground comic, the movie didn't just push boundaries, it bulldozed them. On the surface, Fritz is a mischievous college cat looking for thrills in New York City. But Bakshi's adaptation turned it into a biting satire of American culture in the 1970s. Race, politics, counterculture, and authority figures all got skewered in ways audiences had never seen in animation before. What made Fritz the Cat a phenomenon was how openly it declared, "This is not for kids." It became the first animated film to receive an X rating in the United States, ensuring headlines and massive curiosity. Despite, or maybe because of, that rating, it became a box office hit, raking in millions on a tiny budget. Audiences were fascinated, critics were scandalized, and Hollywood was forced to admit that animation could draw adults just as easily as children. Bakshi's crude, exaggerated style matched the story's chaotic energy. It wasn't polished, but it didn't need to be. It was loud, messy, and unapologetically rebellious. Fritz the Cat remains controversial, but there's no denying its impact. It cracked open a door that Disney would never touch, proving cartoons could take on raw, adult themes without apology. Whether you loved it or hated it, you couldn't ignore it. And that's exactly why it changed the game. 13. The Iron Giant, 1999. If the 20th century ended with one animated film that proved cartoons could move adults to tears, it was The Iron Giant. Directed by Brad Bird, the movie looked like a simple Cold War-era fable about a boy and his robot. What audiences got was one of the most emotionally powerful animated films of the decade. Set in the 1950s, the story follows Hogarth, a lonely boy who discovers a giant metal being from space. Instead of the monster the military fears, the robot is gentle, curious, and innocent. But paranoia looms large. With the Cold War heating up, every shadow is treated as a threat, and the Iron Giant becomes a target. The film builds toward a heart-wrenching climax where the giant, echoing Superman, sacrifices himself to save a town that was ready to destroy him. His final words, "I am not a gun," hit like a hammer. Visually, the movie blended hand-drawn animation with cutting-edge computer effects, giving the giant a weight and presence that felt larger than life. Critics praised it as a masterpiece, though poor marketing meant it flopped at the box office. Over time, however, it gained cult status, becoming one of the most beloved animated films ever made. The power of The Iron Giant lies in its themes: fear versus understanding, violence versus compassion, and the haunting truth of how societies create enemies out of shadows. It was marketed as a kids' movie, but it left adults weeping and critics hailing it as one of the great anti-war statements of its time. Simply put, this was proof that animation could not only entertain, it could break your heart and make you think. 14. Who Framed Roger Rabbit, 1988. When Disney teamed with Touchstone to produce Who Framed Roger Rabbit, audiences expected slapstick fun. What they got instead was a noir detective thriller wrapped in cartoon chaos, and it worked. Set in a 1940s Hollywood where animated characters and humans coexist, the film follows private detective Eddie Valiant as he investigates a murder involving the frantic, wide-eyed Roger Rabbit. The movie plays with cartoon tropes, but the story itself is pure hard-boiled crime, corruption, greed, betrayal, and a city on the edge. The genius of the film lies in its balance. You've got Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse on screen, but you've also got characters framed for murder and plots about wiping out entire communities. It was funny, yes, but also tense, suspenseful, and sometimes frightening. Robert Zemeckis' direction blended live action and animation seamlessly, and the technical achievement alone made jaws drop. But the reason it's remembered as more than a gimmick is because it treated its cartoon characters with weight. Toons weren't just jokes, they had lives, fears, and a society worth protecting. The film became a huge success, sparking renewed interest in classic animation and proving cartoons could hold their own in a grown-up story. It wasn't just nostalgia, it was a gritty, stylish reminder that animation could work in genres far outside the children's aisle. 15. Coraline, 2009. By the late 2000s, most people assumed dark animated films were a thing of the past. Then came Coraline, a stop-motion marvel from Laika Studios that reminded everyone that animation could still creep under your skin like the best horror movies. Based on Neil Gaiman's novella, Coraline tells the story of a young girl who discovers a hidden door in her house leading to another world. At first, it seems perfect. Her other mother cooks better, pays more attention, and life feels brighter. But then the truth emerges. This isn't paradise, it's a trap, and the price is her soul. What made Coraline extraordinary was how unapologetically unsettling it was for something marketed as family-friendly. The button-eyed doubles of loved ones, the twisted circus performers, and the skeletal, spider-like reveal of the other mother were nightmare fuel for kids and even for adults. The tension built with every frame until it became clear that this was less a fairy tale and more a gothic horror in clay and fabric. Visually, it was groundbreaking. Every puppet and set was handcrafted with painstaking detail, giving the film a tactile, eerie atmosphere. The stop-motion medium made the uncanny even more effective. Everything felt almost real, but not quite, enhancing the unease. Critics hailed it as a masterpiece of modern animation, praising its courage to scare, disturb, and challenge audiences. It proved that animation didn't need to be softened for children. It could dive into primal fears and still tell a story about bravery, loneliness, and love. Coraline closed the decade by planting a flag. Animation could still haunt you, still make your skin crawl, and still prove loudly that it was never just for kids. So there you have it, 15 animated films that shattered the myth that cartoons are only for kids. From traumatizing rabbit battles to Cold War robots with more humanity than generals, these movies proved animation could shock, inspire, and devastate with the best of them. Which one stuck with you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit subscribe for more deep dives, and remember, the next cartoon you watch might just change how you see film forever.